guys like C True, who's been working with Snoop Dogg, traveling around, and you. I mean, I think it's truly amazing. Hey everybody, welcome to the Music Biz Club, episode number 4. I got Jarrell King, aka Rellevant, on the other side.
Hey.
And thanks for doing this, man. I know we'd I know a couple years ago we were out in LA at the ASCAP Expo, and you know, some of us that have taken off or starting to yield the seeds of, I guess, success. And you know, I see you're doing pretty well for yourself. So for those who don't, well, why don't you start off by telling your story to everybody who will watch this here now and in the future, who you are and how did you get into the game?
All right. What's going on, everybody? First, thanks, Akil, for inviting me to do this. We've been talking about it for a while, so it's good to see it finally happen. My name is Jarrell King. I'm a music producer. I go by Rellevant. I started making music when I was 14, freshman year in high school. I started off as a rapper. Quickly learned that I did not want to be a rapper. I felt like everybody I knew rapped, and I wanted to be a little more behind the scenes. So I transitioned into production. From there, I was a part of a music group that I used to produce for. All my friends in high school, they would rap, and I was the producer and engineer. Eventually graduated high school, went to school for audio engineering at the Los Angeles Recording School. Did that for a year. After that, I ended up working with a production company for the Black Eyed Peas. I worked with a producer named Prince Board. From there, I just continued to network and hustle and travel and, you know, find every avenue I could to get involved in, you know, keep making music in the process and spending time just investing in myself. And eventually I went to the ASCAP Awards or Expo, and that's when I met you. And from there, I just continued working. And then over the last couple of years, I've worked with a lot of major artists. I do a lot of stuff overseas. So I work in a lot of different international markets. I also do a lot of stuff in television and film in the sync world. I also run my own blog now where I turn around and I teach everything that I've learned thus far in the music industry to up and coming musicians. And that's why I'm a big fan of what you're doing, because I feel like in the music industry, most of the people who actually achieve some type of success, they don't really give the real truth of how they got to where they got to. They usually give like the cliche generic answers of just work hard and, you know, keep owning your craft instead of saying what it really takes. So, you know, that's how we got to where we are now.
Right. I mean, I think it's very exciting coming from that experience in LA. Like when you look at guys like C True, who's been working with Snoop Dogg, traveling around, and you. I mean, I think it's truly amazing. But you know, it's been years. That has taken years to get to that point, and in between, there's a lot of struggles. Like, so I want you to expand on your struggles in getting toward the accolades or the sort of like the multi-platinum records that you've produced so far. What were the struggles of you getting there? And you know,
oh man, I would think. I mean, I know everyone's life is different, but I feel like in a sense, everyone's life is the same because there's always struggles. It all just depends on what you decide to do with those struggles and how you approach them. I think my biggest struggle at the time, or at least coming up, was having limited resources. That was probably the biggest thing that I struggle with. I still struggle with that now. It's just rather it be relationships or finances or time. I feel like most people are troubled with those things, and I was definitely troubled with all of those things. While pursuing music, I also was in college. I was in college part-time all the way up until I got my degree, and that involved being able to study while in the studio, being able to travel. I lived in a different country. At one point while I was in school, I lived in New Zealand for 9 months. That was where I got my first platinum record. And being able to manage that time, being able to afford, being able to do those types of things, 'cause everything is expensive. I live in LA. Los Angeles is definitely on the list of one of the most expensive cities in the country. And being able to afford living expenses, rent, as well as studio time and equipment, all of that stuff. Like there's no real game plan to be able to do any of those things when you first start making music. You don't even acknowledge the fact that there's going to be so much more that's going to be required of you to be able to start scratching the surface of actually doing something successfully, rather than be a songwriter or artist or a producer or anything in any industry. I think for me, I struggle with time, trying to balance my time with working. I did work a job. I still work a job, actually. I work a job now Monday through Friday, but I have great hours, so you would never know. Managing time, being able to fund things, then actually being able to go out and network. I think I struggled a lot in the area of building solid relationships with people because I often encountered very disingenuous fake relationships, especially being here in LA. I feel like I have a stack of cards of people that I've met.
Right. We all
And
do.
how many of them stuck around? Right. How many stuck around? How many emailed me back? How many called me back? How many I still even know? How many still actually just make music? And everyone has their own ulterior motives or their own goals and wants and what they're trying to get. And I feel like, it's just a lot of what can you do for me? And if you aren't valuable to me, then you're worthless to me. And, come back to me when you can actually do something for me. And I feel like coming up, that wasn't a good place to be in because you always want something from someone, especially if they're in a position that can help you advance to where you want to go. So I feel like the relationships part and the time management part were definitely my two biggest struggles thus far. Now, like I said, I still kind of struggle with them now. I've just gotten used to and better to playing the game and all of how to turn it into what you want it to be.
So what one element or what are the first elements you think from your perspective that someone who started out should really focus on in terms of creating a path to success?
Mm-hmm. You said what would be the first step?
Yeah, or what would be like the first few elements that people should focus on?
Okay. I think the first thing you have to do is know what you want. I feel like starting like everyone likes those who make music enjoy making music, but not everybody wants to make music professionally. Even if they're talented enough to do so, some people do and some people don't. And I feel like if you don't want to do it like professionally, then that's something. The better you figure that out, the less stress that you'll have in the future. Because once you realize that you're just doing it for fun, I feel like it will change the way that you approach doing everything that you do regarding the music in itself. If you do want to do it professionally, then I feel like you have to come up with a game plan on how you're actually going to do it, because everyone thinks that, oh, I'm just going to start making music, then I'm going to get a manager, and then I'm going to get a deal, and I'm going to put music out, and everyone's going to start listening to it. But it does not happen that way. It takes a lot of thought. I like to look at being a musician as being an entrepreneur and a business owner. And if you know any business owners, it takes a lot to run a business. Just getting one off the ground, there's so much work just establishing that foundation, almost like building a sky rise. It's like there's so much infrastructure built below surface, below eye level, before they even start building on top of the ground. And I feel like that is the core base of like moving forward and being successful in music or in anything that's going to happen. That's going to be something that you spend your time investing in.
Right. I truly believe, like, back in LA, I hosted a panel with Edwin Cox. I don't know if you've ever heard of Edwin Cox, and that is something that I hone in on. Like, I truly believe that you really need to focus on the business part. A lot of artists go out there and they're like, yeah, I want to be an artist, but you know, at the end of the day, it's like you're a business, and everything revolves around you.
Right.
So, I mean, if you don't have that foundation set, then you're just setting up yourself for failure. And and you don't want to waste your time, and you don't want to waste your team's time or anybody you do business with. So let's talk about the business, of course, but let's talk about the money. Like, where do you make money off your records? Because this is a big topic, and I think a lot of people don't understand it. So, yeah, and let's talk about publishing and where do you make your money off your records?
I make the bulk of my money from the initial sale of either a song or the beat. I do get royalties, but I haven't generated a whole ton of royalties to make me feel like, oh man, like I'm doing good. I don't have like that big hit record on the radio that's going to actually generate the type of royalties you would actually even want. As a producer, most of my money comes from either an artist or a label or an investor who's funding an artist to be able to produce a record for them, rather than just be an instrumental, or to actually deliver a full song, which is typically what I do in most cases when I'm working with some type of singer or artist that sings, rather than like a hip hop artist who can write their own stuff. And even those artists will still take tracks with hooks on them. But in best case scenario for me, an artist or a manager or someone will contact me and say, hey, I have this artist. They are looking to get X amount of songs done. And my next question for them is, what is the budget? And they'll let me know what their budget is. And from there, I'll determine what work can be done within that budget. Often different songs require a different amount of work. So let's say one of my recent singles was a woman in Ukraine, an artist named Tina Carroll. And in that case, she needed, live pianos. She needed string arrangements. I don't think there was a guitar, but in any case where I need to bring in an instrument player, all of that is factored into the budget. So I will take a budget. I will make sure that within that budget, my fee is taken care of. And then I'll also make sure that there's a fee in there for mixing. And if I'm going to bring in an engineer or a recording engineer and any instrument players, there's a budget for that. And if I don't have to bring any of those people in, which most of that stuff I can do on my own, then that's just more money in my pocket. But I'll always allocate some funds to be able to bring in additional people and make sure that they can be compensated as well. As far as publishing and royalties go, the typical split depends on the record and the artist and all the people that are involved. Instrument players that I work with don't typically get any royalties, or I usually do work for hire for instrument players. And then once we do the splits for a record and the record is registered and released, then that's when the royalties start to come. But the royalties take forever to come. Like they can take a year.
Year, 2, 3 years. I mean,
serious.
It's incredible. I think a lot of people don't understand that. So of course, like, you have to get paid up front for your services. And then on top of that, when the royalties start coming in, you have to have a system. So do you have, for example, for example, do you have a business set up, like a LLC? Do you have an accountant? Do you have a team? Like,
I do have an LLC. I don't have an accountant, but I majored in finance in college, and even now, like my job during the day is I work in an accounting department at a tech company. So numbers and money is basically my background. It was all strategic. I did all this for a reason, just so that I can be able to understand my business in and out. So I handle all of my own books for that case, and track my expenses and do my own taxes and all of that.
Right. So I've seen that you have a couple sync placements. The Ice Age, if I'm not mistaken. How did you get into I guess that market? How did you get into sync? Because that's a lucrative area that artists and producers and songwriters could get into, other than the regular route or the most popular route of working with artists.
I actually got into it a few different ways, and even now, like I keep finding different avenues that lead me back to the sync world. But it really just originally it was just an idea. I was working with a production partner, and we were chasing major label artist placements, and something just told me like, hey, there's other ways to basically be able to get paid to make music and still be able to be feel proud and feel like you did something cool and accomplished something. And I feel like TV and film was something that I was always interested in. I'm a big movie head, so I always have had an interest in either doing a soundtrack, being on a soundtrack, or actually doing actual score for a film. So I kind of just put it out into the universe, and randomly a producer that I knew from a few years before that time ended up reaching out to me, and I found out that that's what his focus was. He was just working on syncs. So he and I collaborated on a few different projects, and sure enough, we started landing some syncs left and right. He had a bunch of relationships with a bunch of music libraries. And from there, I started doing my own research of other music libraries and my own initial outreach to find out the type of criteria that they look for in the music, and being able to kind of build a relationship where I could start submitting music for any of their projects, or at least would receive the email or the phone call when they did have projects available so that I could submit for them. As far as a few others, just relationships. I've gotten a couple syncs from just knowing other musicians who know that I'm always down to work, know that I'm always down to collab. And with that being the case, I think the biggest sync that I've had thus far was for Ice Age Collision Course, the last Ice Age movie that came out. And in that situation just happened to work out where one of the songwriters had the opportunity, and she called me and asked me if I'd be interested in potentially making some stuff for the movie. And I said, yeah, of course, why wouldn't I be? And we did 3 records in 2 weeks, submitted them to 21st Century Fox. They liked them all. They took them all. And the day before the film came out, they dropped one of them and released 2. And they were international and nationally released trailers for the film. So certain things, like you can have a plan of action, and the other things is just going to come from, you being available and the relationships that you generated while in the business.
Right. So I'm pretty sure that through sync you've dealt with at least 1 or 2 music supervisors, and I from my experience I've done 1 or 2 films in music supervision, and I've talked to other music supervisors, and I know their criteria is very they're very, what's the word? They're very anal about sending them music and making sure that the criteria for like say ID3 tags and metadata are important. Like, so for everybody who's watching out there who would be interested in getting into sync, and eventually they would have to at some point deal with a music supervisor, what advice would you give to them when they're engaging with these type of people? These are the gatekeepers to film and TV, and if you most times if you send something not correctly done, they'll blacklist you. So what is advice? What is your advice you would give to artists out there when engaging with supervisors?
I would say pay attention to detail. Music supervisors, they're definitely in high demand. They are definitely a gatekeeper. I think a lot of what I've seen lately is music supervisors will often delegate to music libraries, and now they'll just go to the library and have the library deliver the music, someone that they already have a relationship with, instead of just dealing with a bunch of random people who are submitting music. I don't think music supervisors have the bandwidth anymore to sit there and just go through all of that music from all these people who are trying to get their music either placed or synced or whatever. So I see a lot of the music libraries actually being the people that the music supervisors deal with more so than anything. But with that being said, I definitely would say follow their instructions and pay attention to detail. Usually they know what they want. They will give an example. There's usually some kind of reference of what kind of music that they're looking for. They'll provide a song that's similar or like the placeholder of what they currently have, and they're looking for something in that vibe. And then I would say don't deviate far off the path from what they're looking for.
Right. So stepping off from that topic, and let's get into more of your travels overseas. You've been in New Zealand, you've been in Scandinavia. How did you yield those opportunities for yourself, like getting to work overseas and producing records for artists, international artists or artists in other countries, and scoring a few platinum records?
How did I use those situations for myself? Was that what the question?
No, the question was how did you get to those places? How did you yield those seeds for those opportunities?
I think for New Zealand, all of those, basically each of those opportunities have all come from my relationships in the music industry. New Zealand happened. I was hired as a producer to fly out to New Zealand and co-produce on an album that was getting ready to be released for, this actually wasn't for an actual artist, it was for a tech developer. The tech developer was building a music platform that was supposed to be the competitor for SoundCloud, and they wanted to create an album, and that album was a compilation dance album that would be the first album released on their music platform. So I got hired through a production partner at the time to come out and join in the process of creating that album. From there, in New Zealand, I just did more networking and met more artists and began to work with those artists while I was there. So I figured I'd take advantage of being in another country and just try to work with as many artists as I could while there. And that's how I ended up getting the platinum record with 660, who's a New Zealand band. They also have a deal here now in the U.S. As far as Scandinavia goes, one of the songwriters that I work with here, my guy Jordan, he is one of the songwriters in the Ice Age records as well. He has a music publishing deal in Scandinavia. And since we work together often, he'll bring me opportunities that they have there for the artists they have on the label that's partnered with the publisher. So usually the people that I work with a very close circle, but any opportunities that we have, we all bring them to each other and we all just collaboratively try to get as much music done as possible and then submit it all together instead of just trying to do, one person, one songwriter, one artist will say, hey, man, you and you, these are the opportunities that we have. What do you have? What do you have? And how can we all just make a bunch of music and then submit our catalog of music to everyone's opportunity? And in this case, that's what happened. He called me and said, I have opportunity. Here are the artists that we have access to. Let's make a bunch of records for these artists and send them over and see what happens. We did that. We did a camp. We brought in different people, submitted all the records, and of the batch of records that we submitted, one got picked up. That record ended up becoming the title record for the album for an artist named Nike Ankara. He's a rapper signed to Universal Finland. And that ended up making the album. The song became the title record of the album, and the album ended up going 2 times platinum. From there, since that happened, Jordan and I decided to go to Finland to work with more of the writers and artists on the label and publisher. And while we were in the area, I figured again, since I'm going to be in this area and since I'm going to be working with as many people as I can, I might as well reach out to the people I know who live in Sweden and see if they'd be interested in working too, because they're so close together. What's it for me to make a flight over there and to try to get in some more sessions? And by doing so, I reached out to the people that I know in Sweden, and they were more so open to getting together and working. And I ended up partnering up with a publisher out there and got in and worked with some of their artists. And one of the artists I'm actually in the process of signing to my production company and releasing. It'll be probably the first artist I released through the production company. And he just flew out to US a few weeks ago. He came and stayed at my house, and we did a lock-in of 12 days and did a bunch of records. And look forward to that coming out soon. But that's just me taking advantage of the location and the relationships and trying to make the most out of the situation.
Right. So the main thing is networking and using the resources. I mean, that's the big thing. My motto is, you can't stay in your house. Especially if you're living in a big city or a city or a music city. I know a lot of people. They complain, but they're not taking advantage of their location. I'm like, yo, you're living in LA or you're living in New York, or you might be living in Miami, and not taking advantage of what other places lack. So, anyways,
Right.
to end it all, like, what's the biggest thing you've learned, and if any other advice you have for our listeners or our viewers, what is that? What any other advice that can help them grow and into a path of success that you would have?
I would say, starting off, I realized that it's better to put yourself in a position to help someone else while you focus on becoming the best version of whatever you are. So become the best songwriter. Like, while you're focused on developing your skills, sharpening your skills, learning the music industry, learning the business, while you're in that development stage, spend that time helping someone else out and being of value to them. Eventually, you'll get to a point where you are ready to step out into the spotlight as who you are. And from there, you stop being as helpful to other people and start focusing on just yourself. I feel like you do have to be somewhat selfish at some point or another, because at the end of the day, it is your career, it's your life, it's your goal. But one of the best ways to reach your goal is to actually help somebody else reach theirs. And I feel like that helped me a lot, because I always, while I was learning and getting better at being a producer and being more of a student, I was also helping other people as being, a co-producer. I would chop up samples for people. I would do sessions for other producers that were more established than me, where I would just engineer the session and get to be able to sit in and watch the process of how they worked. And eventually it got to a point where it's like, oh, hey, now I'm hiring an intern or someone to sit in on my session, because now it's more about me, and I have to be selective with who I work with, because I can't waste time either. And I have to only work on opportunities that are going to be lucrative or going to lead to a bigger and better opportunity. But you can't start off doing that at first, because you're not really in a place to do that. It takes a lot of time to actually get developed and established. And I feel like a lot of people jump out there way too soon and, wanting to always be about them and their goals when they aren't fully in a position to offer that much value where they're standalone. Most of the time you have to offer value to someone else who has more experience than you. I feel like that, to me, is what helps me get where I have gotten to thus far. And when I look around and see other people in other parts of the business, I can say that that's also helped other people that I work closely to as well.
Good advice, man, because that's also, I've viewed my successes through doing exactly that. Helping people goes a long way, because they respect you more, and when you show up and other people around you see that, it can create opportunities if you're in the right place, and if you're with, I guess, humble enough people, but with people who care and who will want to see the best out of you. So anyways, thanks a lot, man. Thanks a lot for doing this.
Yeah, absolutely.
I appreciate this, and I hope we can work together sometime soon.
Oh yeah, absolutely, man. Anytime, man. Just shoot me a text or email. You already know.